Yep.
All right. So welcome everybody. I'm going to talk, and I'm going to use this abbreviated talk about the new cybersecurity framework. CSF is a product that has been out for a long time. It was a version 1, then it became a version 1.1, and version 2 just got released. Version 2 did a lot of things to help us and to help your organization. Now, let me explain a little bit about this and a little bit about my background. Obviously, you can see I've got lots of certifications. There is my email. I will send Ken the deck so he can place it somewhere for you guys to see. There's my email, there's my blog, and there's my phone number. I travel a lot. If you call me, you may or may not get me. Leave a voicemail. If you send me email, and please do if you got questions, just understand I travel a lot, and please put somewhere in the header who you are, because otherwise I get enough spam that I'm not going to pay any attention. Microsoft MVP, I worked on the CSF framework as part of one of the working committees for NIST, so I'm really built into this. This CSF framework is a difference from what the US government had been doing in the past. So the US government has something called the Risk Management Framework, which is the methodology they use, and private corporations and companies can use this as well, but it's a requirement for the US government on the steps that you have to take to get an application approved to run inside a federal agency. All of a sudden, somebody wakes up and says, well, that's great, but what about everything else inside the enterprise? You know, if we authorize an application, what about the other things like the network and how interaction between all these other networks work? So NIST came out with the cybersecurity framework. Version 2.0 was released February. So this is a real product now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the journey. I'll talk about the titles. I'll talk about the scope. I'll talk about that sort of stuff. You have questions, just holler out. Okay, so CSF came out originally as a government project. And then the government realized that industry, i.e. our companies, and by the way, companies around the world, could use this as a good working tool. And they did some things in version 2.0 that I'm very happy to say really make sense. One of the things that they did is they came out with some quick start guides. So if I wanted to use this cybersecurity framework and I'm a small business, there are guides on it, and there are profiles and ways to do it. Now, CSF really talked about a couple things, and the statements were, how do I identify? So the identify comes out to, what do you have? I'm going to jokingly say this, and I'm going to say it to Ken only because I know Ken's on the mic. Hey, Ken, can you tell me all the servers that you have in your environment, what software is running on all the servers, and what ports and services are running? You can do that, right?
That I can do. If you ask me other questions, I can't do, but that I can.
Okay. How many people on this line do you think could answer that question in the affirmative? Yes, I can do this for all the servers in our environment and all the software that's running. And the numbers goes down really small, okay? So they say, well, first of all, we need to know what you have. Because if you don't know what your configurations are today and you get hacked, how are you going to know what changed? Going to get technical for a second, but it'll make sense. If all of a sudden a server shows up with port 53 on it, does that mean somebody put DNS on it? Or does that in and did something and installed something on port 53? That's the messaging they're talking about. So we need to identify the software, the configurations, the management of the servers. We need to understand who's got access to what. Then CFS said, well, we need to protect that. And they were very different in the mindset that's been happening in the past. CSF says, fundamentally, it's not, are you going to be hacked? It's when you're going to be hacked. Or have you already been hacked already? So how do you protect the important stuff? And the way that organizations have been working in the past is we build these walls and we protect everything kind of the same way. We have these defense in depth and we have all these layers. And I'm going to be blunt. There's public stuff inside the building that doesn't need to be protected as compared to some of the other stuff. So wait a minute. Here's the modality and say, let's protect the critical stuff, or more important, invest the money in that. Then the next element that they talked about was detect. In other words, how do we recognize there's a problem? If you've gotten hit by ransomware, you know within 24 hours you got hit by ransomware. Why? Because all of a sudden it pops up saying, pay us money. But if somebody's broken into your organization, i.e. North Korea, China, Russia, Iraq, the nation states, they want to stay there for as long as they can. And the numbers right now is about 283 days it takes for an organization to understand that they've been attacked and have been penetrated, i.e. penetrated, and then guess what? There are multiple ways for the organization to get back in. And then how do we respond to the incident? Followed by how do we recover? That was the initial framework. That's what the CSF framework 1.0 and 1.1 had. And in version 2, they said, stop, we need governance. Stop. We need upper management to give us direction on what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. This was a very big change because this was all about technology, and now it's become the partnership between the business, management, and IT. And what happens is that there are a bunch of functions that we use that work into the categories, and then there are subcategories underneath that. So we look at this from understanding the organizational profile. Let me be very clear, and I do this as an example all the time. If you're the Marines, you're expected that you're going to go into harm's way. You're going to be infantry, that if you're a lifer for the Marines, you're going to see a war zone and be under place. Hi, I work for the Air Force. I work 9 to 5. I have the weekends off. Boy, there's a difference between the two organizations. Now, please don't, if you're an Air Force guy, say that's not true, but you know what I'm saying here. What's the risks to your organization to understand it? Because each organization's risks are different. How do we gather the needed information from the business? We're IT, okay? I know IT always says no to the business, or at least that's the line that goes on. Well, guess what? And then the business figures out a way to do it, and then we go nasty, 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 we slap your hand, and then we work with the business to do it. That's not working anymore. So we need to understand what the organizations do. We need to analyze the gaps and then implement a plan, and we keep doing this. The way that CSF looks at this, if you will, okay, is very simple. We say that there are the executives, or we call that tier 1, who are going to give us the priorities, the changes, the appetite, the risk budget, the money. Then we have that middle level, tier 2, which we call managers and the business units. What do they need to get our jobs done? And then down on tier 3, that's where IT is. That's where we're implementing the technology. So there are different framework protocols and frameworks that we have to look at. Obviously, I have to understand the direction of the organization. Okay, we have to understand. If there's a new law in Massachusetts, I'm just going to pick this out of the sky, that says we need to do the following things, and it's going to cost $100,000 to do it in Massachusetts. And Ken's only got one employee in Massachusetts, but it's a senior manager. And he says that's going to cost $100,000. He says, oh, by the way, the fine is $100 if I don't do it. What do you think management's going to do? Take the $100 fine or spend $100,000? Well, guess what? We need to understand, and management, i.e. the executives, need to understand that so they can address it and deal with it the appropriate way. And we need to share that information. That conversation needs to be up and down the line so that we understand what the business needs, what the executives need, what IT needs. We've been playing in a shadow for years where and upper management in the business doesn't understand why we do what we need to do. CSF says, wait a minute, we all need to communicate. Now remember, CSF in the government space is now a requirement. They have to do it. So we're starting to see emotional changes happening inside the federal agencies to say, wait a minute, I, as upper management, really have to get involved in the big picture of things. CSF also says to us that we need to understand what the cyber risks are and what the privacy risks are. So now we're starting to bring privacy back into the discussion. It should have been there all along, but now we're starting to bring it. Remember that the risk management framework was all around a single application. Now we're saying, let's look at the entire enterprise. And there is some documents that the federal agencies have. And Ken, I'll forward these to you so you have them. When I'm in the risk management framework, I look at something called FIPS 199, and it says, based on confidentiality and availability, what is the security level that I have to build that application on? But there is no such thing like that across the entire enterprise. So it became a very big discussion point, because if I have an application or a service running as well, we don't have to worry about it as much. What's the risk to the network, to the infrastructure? We started looking at that. We also started looking at what the privacy requirements are. So the framework looks at these, and they use some initials. GV for governance. What's the company's cyber strategy? What's the expectations? What are the policies written and communicated and monitored? How do we identify the risks and understand what those risks are? What do we do to protect it? How do we detect it? How do we respond? And then what do we do to recover? What do we do to recover? And how do we exercise this to make sure it works? So this is a living document. NIST started this in 2014. Version 1.1 came out in 2018, and now we're in version 2.0. Kind of a feel for it. So in what do you call it? In 2022, 2 years ago, there was a request and we started putting out comments. Then there was a workshop, actually went to 3 of the workshops, okay, where we sat down and gave ideas of what we thought. We then analyzed it. Then there was a conceptual paper. Then they went back to working workshop, more comments. And then finally in February, it released out. This is what the document looks like. The link is on the bottom. But if you just look up NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, all of the resources are there. So this was designed for all size organizations. And I use the word all size. By the way, does anyone know what the smallest federal agency is? Here's a trivia question for you. The smallest federal agency, which, by the way, was too small to get on the government cloud because they were too small to sign the agreements to get there. Nope, it's not the EPA.
That was a good one, try. That was a good one, Alex. That was a good try, Alex.
Okay, and guess what? Every one of you have heard of the rules that come from this. The Access Board. And you're going, well, who and what is the Access Board? Ever hear of Americans with Disability Act? That's them. There are 25 employees in the entire agency. Their IT staff is 3 people. Okay? But guess what? So it works for them. It works for my company with 5 people, and it can work for an enterprise company. Okay? This is voluntary through non-governmental agencies, but I'm seeing this working well. And this is being run all across the world as a solution. It is a methodology to help manage cybersecurity. And because the framework is flexible, it allows us to say in Ken's organization what most important thing and what I think is the most important thing and what Aaron thinks is the most important thing and somebody else thinks is the important thing. All of them are different, and because they're different, they gave us capabilities to manage the risks based on what our organization recognizes as the risk. So if I'm a pharmaceutical company, the risk for them is their research and development and making sure no one knows what they're working on. If I'm a car manufacturer, it's making sure no one sees the designs of my car on the test track before it gets out. So each one of us are different. And this framework allows us to do this. So it allows us, okay, to be understood by upper executives. It helps us to be understood by the practitioners, us in security and in cyber. It lets the business people understand this. And because of this, it gave us a group of security controls that we could use to mitigate security risks. It's interesting, the controls that they suggest using are the CIS controls, the 18 CIS controls, because they're easier to understand than the NIST 800-53 Rev 5, which is 470 pages of controls. So inside of this, there are three elements of it. There's the core, which talks about the functions of the categories. There's what our organization looks like and what our goals are. And then there are tiers. And I want to kind of go over that. And the tiers help us to look at where are we as in our pathway? Are we a mature organization? Are we a non-mature organization? And how do we get to where we need to be? So we need to understand what's the access, what are the gaps? Then we need to prioritize, okay? I need to prioritize what's the requirements to our organization. And then how do we communicate this inside and outside of IT? How do we get the CISO, the CEO, the board to understand these risks? This is the goal here. Once again, adding that governance window is what brought the controls. Now, what they did is they did not get
Whatever.
rid of any of the controls.
Then you don't answer it, yeah.
They didn't get rid of any of the controls, but they moved them around so a lot of the controls show up now in governance. In other words, hey, board, hey, executives, you're responsible for answering these questions, not IT. Because IT never could really answer the questions because we didn't have the power, the goals to do that. Question? Okay. So
I have a
it
question, Jay.
said, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, what would you say to a business owner that says, my data is not that important?
So I asked the question, good. Do you mind if I delete it all?
Oh, no, it's important, but
Well, okay, so I'm going to ask the conversations that I typically have with the small and medium-sized businesses, with the MSP community and the VAR community, when they say, hey, Jay, but the management doesn't. Okay, so I'm just going to delete all your data. Is that okay? How's your business going to run? And they go, what if you lost your customer database or your QuickBooks accounting and you didn't know how much people owed you? All of a sudden, it's like, excuse me, stop. Okay. Now, if I go to a doctor's office, you know what the doctor's office cares about? They care about getting paid. So I need to talk to them in the language of the risk that they understand, that they're willing to accept. I'm never going to convince everybody to spend money. But if I say, hey, important thing, what would be the one thing that in the middle of the night, if you lost that, your world would tumble?
so you're saying everybody has those crown jewels, right? A pharmaceutical company has their R&D, the car manufacturer has their design, but even a smaller company has that customer database, and that to them, that's the crown jewels.
And Andrew, here's the $1 million statement. In the CSF framework, you know what we say? Well, good. If that's the most important, that's where we should invest the time and money to protect your infrastructure. And that's actually pick the things that are important to you and deal with them. And deal with them and put your goals and objectives on protecting the crown jewels. Not what we've been doing in the past, which is to build a wall with a wall with a wall with a wall with a wall to protect everything from the outside coming in. Yeah, we still need the firewall and the router, but you know what? If the number one thing in your organization is X, then you should be spending your efforts to protect X Yes, you still need to do the other stuff, but put all your emphasis on X. That's what CFF is saying, which is really a good statement, because guess what? It's the reality. Why do I need to spend millions of dollars to protect public information? It's public. Who cares? I need to protect the information that's critical to my organization. That's the important thing. And traditionally, it's been, we're going to protect everything inside the organization by spending a lot of money on all of the things. So there's no waiting inside the data frames, inside the business. It's building the circle with the circle, it's building the onion and not necessarily putting the resources where they've been. Now, yes, I will say that IT tries, but I'm going to ask this question, Andrew, and I don't think we've ever met. Are you an IT person?
I'm in IT. Yeah.
Okay, so could you tell me which users use which services and servers, and when they're used the most, and how many users use each one of those servers?
No.
Well, guess what? Then how can we make the decision on how to protect it? We can't.
So, but yeah, I'm my understanding is the CSF 1.1 was more technical based, and now we're realizing that with CSF 2.0, there's another factor, and that's the whole social engineering piece that is now coming in, and where you're realizing even with all these firewalls and all the technical stuff that we have in place, the one thing that really needs to be addressed now is the social engineering piece, the human firewall.
It's more than social engineering. It's more than social engineering. It's understanding what the risk management strategies are, what the policies are, what the procedures are. Because there's also things like supply chain.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you have seen this. Let me just open up a web page here for a second and show you something.
Well, one of the things I see that this really forces is a communication now between the business and IT, and it brings in a whole new role of that liaison between IT and the business, and that collaborative communication really wasn't there, and this forces that effort, which was a big gap.
Collaborative, and it's a different perspective.
Right.
What do you think
this
about
is requiring that management understand and give us the guidance we've never had. Or let me change that. Not that many organizations have had. So I just want to give you a feel here. So this is a little gem. Okay. For those of you who don't know, there was a guy in Miami. This guy right here. In Miami, he created 19 companies and 15 fronts, and he sold $1 billion worth of fake Cisco equipment using all of these company names to organizations. And I wouldn't be doubtful to say that maybe somebody on this phone right now has bought equipment from him. And guess what? You don't know that your Cisco environment, if you're using Cisco, has been compromised because you bought a box that said Cisco on it, that looked Cisco, that smelled Cisco, that was in Cisco boxes with Cisco labels, that wasn't from Cisco. Guess what? That's a really big issue. Because of that issue, guess what? One of the elements, and I'm just going to jump to the next slide, that's happened is that now, guess what? Under governance, we have organizational content, risk management, roles and responsibilities, policy, oversight, cybersecurity, supply chain management now shows up. Hey, boss, we can't necessarily buy from the cheapest place. We may need to buy from a manufacturer or from a manufacturer's approved vendor, so we make sure that we're not compromising what we're bringing in.
Hey, Jason.
Yes.
On that note, this might be a loaded question, but the convergence of CSF 1.1 to 2.0, wouldn't it be in the best interest of a company just to align the governance under their total ERM strategy, because it's impacting any facet of the business model? Why would you isolate it in CSF 2.0 when you just put it in your whole kit and caboodle ERM?
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question, and it's a real simple one. Do I have an ERM program for a business of 12 employees.
Probably not.
Now so guess what? If you already have this in your environment, roll it into it. If you don't have this in your environment, this is a reason to get it in your environment. Remember, the framework here is, guess what? Okay. The framework here is very simple. It's customizable based on your organization. You know, if I'm running Archer and I've got a GRC application, maybe this is part of what it is. If I'm not running anything, what do I do? So the guidance here is this is customizable based on the profiles. I'll get there in a couple of minutes to show you what it is. But the message here is not everything is as important as it needed to be. Let's pick what they are, understand what those risks are. That's what this governance is. Give me the policies, give me the responsibilities, give me the strategies. Are we going to have a spare data center? Are we going to put our stuff in the cloud? What are we going to do? This is all governance decisions that typically IT's been doing before.
Hey,
Remember,
Jay, you know,
federal agency, same statement here. Federal agency, same statement.
with the new privacy laws, this I think is really helpful because it will help business owners understand what's important. If nothing else, even if they don't have a good idea of, you know, what data is most important, right? Say they can't figure that out, at least they can look at the privacy laws and say, okay, at least we have to adhere to this.
Well, but here's the problem, and I'm going to be blunt. The US doesn't have a common privacy law. Okay, tell me what the privacy law is in West Virginia, and I'll tell you the answer. Oh, I'm sorry, there's not one. Okay, so the problem is, does upper management, I'm going to be blunt, watch this. How many small businesses do you think even understand what the PCI requirements are? Oops,
Yeah, I
never
mean,
mind.
so
Keep my mouth shut.
Especially with 4.0 coming out now, it's changed a lot. There's a lot more.
But
aspects
guess
to it,
what?
right?
I'm going to play the game here. Okay. I helped a friend. He needed to take credit cards. So he went to one of these organizations. I'm not going to use the name. They required him to take an online training for PCI. Question 1, answer A, B, C, or D. Wrong. Question 1, A, B, C, or D. B, wrong. Question 1, A, B, C, or D. C. Question 2, A, B, C, or D. A. Question 3, A, B, C, or D. A, wrong. Do it again. B, wrong. Do it again. C, wrong. D. Oh, you've successfully completed the PCI training. Now, I know and you know that's not real training, but it met the requirement of the training of the agency that was giving them the card. It is what it is. It's a reality we have to understand. Am I going to get everybody to use CSF? Absolutely not. Okay, but it's something that we can offer them that makes sense. Okay, it's something that we can offer them. So just to move forward a little bit here. So in identity, it's asset management. What do we have? What's authorized? What's not authorized? Risk assessment, and how do we approve in self? Now you'll notice that there's like GVOC or GVRM or IDAM. Those reference, okay, different controls that live inside of NIST in the NIST 800-53. They're also common controls that live inside of the CIS, okay? Then we have protect. How do we deal with identity, authorization, and access controls? Awareness training. Yes, one of the requirements is train the end users. How do we do data security, platform security? How do we make redundancy in our technology? How do we do continuous monitoring? How many small companies do you think do continuous monitoring? Oh, never mind. We won't even go there. How do we look at what's happening? Okay. No, I'm going to be blunt. If you're a company under 50 people, you probably don't have a security incident event mechanism, a SIM of some type. You don't even know what it is. So how do we start helping them with that? And then how do we deal incident management? And realistically, if you're a big company, you practice DRs and incident response all the time. What about small and medium-sized companies? They don't. How do we report it? How do we mitigate it? And then how do we build an incident response plan? So in CSF 1.1, there were 5 functions. In CSF 2.0, there's the 6-function governance. There's 22 subcategories. There's 106 sections. So for example, ID has a group, and then there are 363 examples of solutions that you can choose. Keyword, you can choose or not use. So the pyramid is, we have the key functions, recover, etc. We have the categories, we have the subcategories, and then we have the implementations. We also have, if you will, the current profile. So this is kind of a gap analysis. Where are we today? Where do we need to get to? Okay. Where are we? What's the practices, the status, the ratings? What's our priority, and what's our goals going to be? What's our objectives? It's on a scale of 1 to 4, just 4 little simple levels. Okay. Those simple levels are very clear and understood of what you need to do. I'm not saying you have to get to a 4. 4 is almost automated and perfect. It may not make us a lot of sense. Certain things you want to automate, you want to activate. If you're building 1 computer a year, why do I need to automate it? If I'm building 30,000 computers a year, yeah, I can see the cost savings by automating the process. So they help you to understand this framework based on the organizational's current goals and requirements. Go ahead. Question? So what we do is we establish a scope. Okay. What's the priority? What's the orientation? Where are we? We do a risk assessment to understand our target profile. We determine the gaps, and then we build a plan. And we keep doing this over and over again. And these 4 tiers, tier 1 is partial. What that means is fundamentally, we do it ad hoc. Tier 2, we've got some risk. Tier 3, it's repeatable. And tier 4, it's adaptive. We're working better and better. I'm not going to read this slide, but here's the details of tier 1, 2, 3, and 4 and what they mean. And what's nice about this is this framework, this design, this structure should be used across the enterprise on everything when it comes to cyber. So everybody's talking the same way. One of the things that CSF wants us to do, and it's very important, is they want the entire organization mapped based on these 4 tiers. So that one group says, well, I'm a tier 3, and the next group says I'm a tier 2 because they have different definitions. We're now giving them very, very defined definitions of what's required. So partial is there's a limited awareness of the cybersecurity risks. Okay. Cybersecurity risk management is irregular on a case-by-case basis. Okay. The organization is unaware of the risks with its suppliers, products, and services it acquires and uses. Ooh, that might be a really disgusting statement to make, because I bet you there's a lot of people who aren't thinking about that last bullet. Okay, and then we work our way up all the way through the process. So NIST said, and I was involved heavily in this, we need to come out with what we call quick start guides. In other words, if I'm a small business, what's the steps that I do? I'm an enterprise business, what's the steps that I do? And these are supplementary guides that help us work our way through. Wait a minute. You mean there's actually something for a small to medium-sized business that they can do? And yes, these quick start guides say you're a small business. You don't have the budget that GM has. You don't have the budget that Bank of America has. You're a small law office. You've got 4 lawyers and 3 clericals. What do you do to protect yourself? This, in my mind, made all the difference. It made this manageable and accessible to all sorts of audiences. And they continue to work on these profiles, these tiers, and these risk management for it. And they're going to work on, they haven't finished, they're going to work on things like doctor's offices, hospitals, so that those organizations that have unique issues will have guidance on how to do this. Any questions?
I heard also that one of the big differences also between this and the previous version is that the old one was really for government, and this one is not at all. And that was a big change of focus as well.
Ken or I am. Say that again.
What I'm saying is that the focus was on government entities with version 1, and with version 2, it's for everybody.
So version 1.1, they said was for everybody, but they didn't give any ways to do it. Version 2 said, if we're going to use this, and this really makes a lot of sense, because I don't know any frameworks out there for small and medium and enterprise businesses. Here's a de facto standard to use. Here's something that can really guide you. So yes, and that was one of the things that when I was sitting on the committee, how do we make this available to everybody? Because it makes a lot of sense. How do I get the enterprise and the small business and those other organizations that aren't government to use this? So,
all right, there's a question here in the chat. If a company wants to mature their cybersecurity program to meet NIST 853 moderate baseline, can they begin by leveraging the NIST CSF 2.0 and then assess their maturity level to find the areas that need improvement for 853, or should they skip CSV
so I'm
altogether?
thinking here, companies don't have to follow NIST at all. Okay, companies don't have to follow NIST at all. NIST has a bunch of documents. 800-53B is a document that gives you kind of the 800-53 Rev 5 is all the controls. There are 470 associated pages. They recognize that the capability, maturity, that those controls are massive and not necessarily obtainable by a lot of organizations. So they recommend for organizations that are not federal agencies to use CSF instead of the NIST 800-53. Now, if you're doing work and you're under CMMC, for example, which is your contractor to DoD, then there are additional requirements that you have to do to get your certification. But guess what? Even the NIST, even the CSF Framework 2.0, those guidance tools are pretty good as compared to have to beating yourself up with the NIST 800-53. So there are references back to either CIS or to the to NIST 800-53 Rev 5. Your choice in the way you want to do it.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay. So
let me ask you, Jay, is it in the reference guides or in the help supplements, are there any guidelines on working with the communication to senior management, to the boards of the world, to get the buy-in and to work the governance? Because it's a very different communication and a very different mindset that they have, right, than IT.
Yes. So one of the things, and it's an ongoing process, and I can't say when it's going to come out, but CSF 2.0 has a group of additional documents that are coming out. For example, the executive summary document or PowerPoint, which is going to be, 20, 25 slides that says, this is what governance is, this is what you have to do, and here's why CSF works for you. There are third-party people who are building that content as well. There are third-party people who are going to come up with CSF courses, okay? I know I'm writing one right now that'll be available September timeframe that I'm going to deliver for a couple of chapters, okay? That'll be a day-long thing on the details of this. So the answer is yes, that people are working and NIST is working on this. so that in the download, okay, download to the 2.0 information on the right-hand side here. Let me just get my little highlighter going. This section right here is where that's going to come out. Some of it's there, not all of it yet. Okay. Now, this, by the way, is a spreadsheet that you can use. The other thing that's happened, and for those of you who heard me talk about this before, there's a tool that CISA, C-I-S-A came out, well, actually, DHS came out with, and then CISA took over it. It's called CSET. CSET is a downloadable tool that you can download, and it questions a whole bunch of things. You can either build networks with it or others. Let me see if I have it on my computer. I think I do. Yes, I do. Okay. I'll open it up, and while it's opening, I'll explain it to you. They are building right now into the CSET toolkit version 2.0 questionnaires. So what CSET does, by the way, this is a free download from CISA. It's a great tool. I would suggest you install it on a virtual machine. It does not, this is important, does not talk to any agency. You can download it and disconnect it from the network. There's no network traffic required unless you want to update it. So what this tool allows you to do is bring people together, okay? And I'll just do the example here. Start a new assessment, okay? You pick what kind of assessment you want. Here's the version 1.1. They're working on the 2. It's got network, it's got maturity models, it's got dependencies, it's got CMM 2.0, cybersecurity maturity model. It's got lots of these tools. It's a great tool for you to know. If you're a hospital, there's HIPAA, there's crime, healthcare, there's a whole bunch of them. So you pick the framework you want. By the way, it'll also look at building your network maps for you. I'm just going to do this one as an example. It says, what's the framework you want? You give your name and organization, blah, 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 blah. You then choose who's going to do it. You say, what's the sector of your organization? What's the industry? What's the gross value? You give it how much work you're going to need. If this is a small company, it might be an hour or 2. If it's an enterprise, it could be 2 weeks. It is not meant for IT to do. This is meant for IT, the business, and the executives do as a group conversation. You put the business unit, you put the organizational type, and other information in here. Then you pick the security assertion level for what the risks are. We can either use the NIST 800 FIPS 199 or the NIST 60. You pick what the levels are of what you're doing. I'm just going to pick some for the purpose of the discussion. And then what happens is it starts adding you questions. These questions are based on the NIST CSF Framework 1.1. They're working on the 2.0. So in this, it's going to ask me a question. Does a registration process require authenticators to be given by people in authorized personnel? You'll notice right here, it gives me a detailed standard, and it says, oh, look, here's what's the requirement. It gives me a place for supplemental guidance. It gives me comments. It gives me a place where I can put my artifacts and documents, my proof. Okay. It gives me references. Here's the references. There's the CIS Common Control, number 16. It also gives me observations, and I can put feedback. And I answer all of these questions. Yes, no, maybe. I get all done. And then I get results. Obviously, there's not going to be any results here. Okay. And what will happen is it'll give me a scoring. It'll give me as a printout an executive summary. I love this. Okay. It'll give me an executive summary. So you can see I haven't done anything. It'll give me what controls I need and what I've done right or wrong. Okay. And then on the reports, it'll give you an executive summary, a site summary. It'll give you a plan of what you need to do to get to the level that you want based on what it is. By the way, the tool also, I'm just going to do this, a resource library. And guess what? All of this, all of these standards are right in it. It's called, okay. And all of these standards are in it. Great tool to know about. Okay. It really works well. They also have tools where you can save this. You can come back to it. You can do a comparison. When I did it before, again, you can import modules. This is how we'll get the 2.0 into here. You can build your own modules. You can look at trends. And you can also, under the tool itself, if you want, you can encrypt your assessments so that no one else can look at them. And you see prevent encryption, or I can turn encryption on. So let me just do, and by the way, I'll just show this. You can also do network diagrams. So you can build your own network diagram or bring a network diagram in. This is a great tool, okay? As Ken says, this is what we should use for the intern program. I will tell you, a lot of you should use this tool anyway, okay? So once again, then there's implementation information. There's a reference guide for more
Jay?
information. Yes, question?
Yes, I do have a question. I wanted to piggyback on the guy's previous question in regards to buy-in. How do you does the framework allow you to quantify these changes? Because I think that's ultimately what you're dealing with small and medium businesses, as you know. The example you gave was, you know, $100 for the fine versus $100,000 for implementing a solution. Is there a does it provide a dollars and
No.
cents?
No,
it doesn't. Okay.
because it doesn't, the framework itself doesn't understand the value of your data. It requires that you as a small organization know the value of your data. What I have done to small organizations is I've used the CSET tool set if I have the ear of an executive, and I'll spend an hour and I'll just ask the questions. And they'll get this executive summary. I say, okay, now what's the most important thing in your organization? They say this, this, and this. I said, well, how do we now take those things and protect it so you can sleep at night? I'm going to ask the question. How many small businesses do you think, James, back up their computer every day?
Sorry, my bad. Sorry, I thought you said
Or
that was a joke.
right. Or I love this one. Keep the hard drive connected to the computer so when they get ransomware, their hard drive is also encrypted.
Encrypted. Yep. Yes, sir.
You know,
Pretty much
so
everything.
my conversation with these organizations, when I deal with them, and typically I'm dealing with 3-letter agencies and government agencies and power grids, is how do I address these things and make it meaningful to upper management or to the owner of a business? And there's some skills there. This is something we could probably talk about some other time as a discussion point on the methodologies that we do. So let me just jump here and show you, this is the framework. And oh, by the way, guess what? Here's all the elements and how they work together as a solution, and some of the tools that they have out to help you work with it. So realistically, we recognize the new use. We've created a new function in governance. We've increased the guidance on how to do CSF. We've started talking about supply chain. We now start understanding cyber measurement and assessment. And we've aligned this with other, and when I say we, NIST has aligned this with other cybersecurity frameworks and standards. So for example, here it is mapped to ISO 27001, 2002, the standard. They're mapped. It's not like we have to create it from scratch. They actually said, well, wait a minute, there's already a standard out here. How do we work with the existing standard? Or how do we deal with, what do you call it? The NIS 2 directive, which is the European Union. How do we work with them together? They added that component because they said this is a worldwide solution. So they added that together as well. Questions? Anyone have any questions that I can go over?
This was really thorough. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is great. This is.
Yeah, this is great.
You have a question for
Sure.
Jason? What will be improved for the next version? Where does this still fall short in your opinion?
So at this point right now, given that it's a month old, what's being improved is all the ancillary subset tools that help discuss this process. I think that very honestly, version 2 is going to last for another 3 to 4 years because they've thought this through enough. What's the big change is one, this is now, and they've actually printed it and given it guidance. I can be a really big organization or a really small organization, and I get the solutions that I need. This was not something that was addressed ever before. So let me just do this.
And just to quickly ask that you will get a copy of the presentation, correct?
Say again?
We will be able to have a copy of your presentation.
I will get it to Ken later tonight.
And
then he can
also,
figure out-
this is all recorded, so this will be available on our newsletter and on our website soon.
Okay, so this is the CSF 0.0. Okay, the comments, the drafts, the strategy. There's the slide you just saw. Okay. And then guess what? Here's the searchable catalog. So it actually references information in catalogs and where you can find this stuff. So there's CSF really has spent. I love these quick start guides. Okay. This is the page we looked at. So small businesses, I'm just going to play and say, let's look at the small business side. So this is this quick guide for small business. What is it? How do we get started with it? Here's what you need to consider. Here's how you identify. You can see it's very short. Here's how you protect. Here's how you detect. Here's how you respond. And oh, by the way, I can click here to get all the other resources. This is not a hard thing to share with somebody, okay? This is quick, fast, and easy. Oh, wait a minute. You want to see all the controls? Guess what? Here's the regular controls, and we can actually learn the tool and how to use the tool. So they've really built this well.
Hey, Jason, you showed the mappings to like ISO 27001. Is there ancillary documents that do the mappings to to industry specific things like HIPAA or NERC or those types?
Not yet, but that will be happening. So the conversation went this way internally, and I think this kind of makes sense. Okay. As an organization, NIST could say, we're going to bring all this stuff out today and wait. Or they said, wait a minute, the risk of not releasing the framework to federal agencies and other organizations is very high because we've not looked at it this way. Let's deliver version 2.0 that's got an enterprise view, a government view, a small business view, and we can work on other tools as it goes out. So are they going to come out with all the rest of these? I don't know the answer yet, but I know the tiers are going to come out and the quick start guides are going to come out when they come out. I don't know, but I know they're working on this. Okay. And this slide right here, fundamentally, the NIST 800, excuse me, the NIST SP 1301, I'm saying it out loud just so you can hear it, talks about the steps and what you have to do. So here's the slide, if you will, the executive management slide of what the steps are and what you need to do. Okay. Other questions?
What was the CISA's site that you have for CNET?
CISA for there it is.
CSET, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, one question. So,
So just bear with me, Jurgen. The differences in the tiers in version 1.1 and 2, there's still 4 tiers, but they're much better defined. So you really understand, are you a 1, 2, 3, or 4? Somebody else had a question?
yes. So is this the tool that you installed in your desktop where you were building that diagrams?
Yeah, it's actually on my laptop.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to suggest you don't put it on your laptop, you put it in a VM. And I'll tell you why. It installs a SQL Server Lite database. If you're not using it all the time, Diago, you don't want the SQL Server database on your machine and you have to patch it. So put it on a VM.
Okay. So just trying to understand how much overlap is this between just following the 2.0 framework. Is this mainly to do like a self-assessment?
Say that again. I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm trying to understand the overlap or between this tool and the framework. Like what's the actual use case you mentioned at the beginning to use that tool? What's the main use
So the
case?
reason I like using CSET is because CSET, once version 2.0 comes out in CSET will ask you the questions if you're an enterprise, and then document where you need the work and what your levels are, so that you have a document. One, it's a PDF or a Word document you can give to executive management, but 2, it's a way to track as you're doing and solving the solutions. Another word
Perfect.
as well.
I see. So it's actually going to be, the questionnaire is going to be available representing the 2.0 framework. Perfect. Got it. Thank you.
Yes.
So I have a question. I'm in third-party risk, and I've been doing a lot of mappings of like SIG lights or the enterprises custom questionnaire that we send out to the third parties, and then I map it to NIST 853. With CSF 2.0, are we able to, or am I able to go down to the control level and do mappings? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Based on what use case, what level you want to use. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're using the enterprise guides, the answer is yeah.
And they have a small business that if you have a small business questionnaire, you could kick them off something specific, right?
Well, no, then you use the small business guidance one.
Okay.
All right. What we're going to do now is we're going to have a breakout session for a little bit, for a few minutes to give Jay a break from talking, and then we'll do a short interview. So we'll have a 10-minute icebreaker break that we normally have, and today's topic is, how are you going to implement NIST 2.0 at your company? All right, so we'll be back.
And I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, we're going to be back in 10 minutes. Thank you, Jay. This was a phenomenal presentation. I'm going to break everybody off in